A shrilling alarm shrieked through star lanes. A human warship had stepped into the descending war zone. Command centers went into a panic, combing through data that affirmed the unimaginable. And that craft, sky-smashing and once ascribed to rumor, was real. Alarms blared. The galaxy's protectors readied themselves against a threat no one could ignore. All unready. In the centers of civilization across the galaxy, political leaders fixated on holoscreens showing a singular unending image of a human warship crossing the border into a war zone that stretched across dozens of star systems. For millennia, various alien factions fought over it, struggling for control of resource-rich worlds. None had anticipated that humanity, many dismissed as primitive, would dare interfere. Suddenly, a human warship came crashing into every sector. News traveled at light speed. From the smallest outpost to the largest battle station, command decks erupted in confusion. How could humans, seen as primitive and beneath comparison technologically, create a machine that evaded scan detection and crossed heavy conflict lines? Even the most powerful fleets struggled to locate the intruder precisely. Its reactor signature dwarfed anything recorded earlier, implying a more powerful heart than anyone dared to expect. Alien tacticians scrambled to hold fire on ruined starbases. Some called for immediate ceasefires to focus on driving off the human craft. Others called for the doubling of the front lines, certain that the warship could strike anywhere. Strained alliances coalesced among species that had fought for decades, united by a singular alarm. They might not endure humanity's incursion if they remained divided. Military intelligence reeled. Scouts dispatched to assess the warship's capabilities returned with vague, chilling reports. Their logs spoke in awe of searing energy shields, rail cannon with nearly relativistic muzzle velocity, and a stealth array that left sensors baffled. Conventional fleets, pummeled by endless local wars, felt hopelessly outmatched. Muscle-spasming denial festered that if humans had really got these fearsome technologies right, no existing navy would be safe. Commanders on capital worlds barked desperate commands, rashing together mangled fleets. In a frenzied effort to catch up, war factories belched forth upgrades to their weapons. But no template could be amended quickly enough to hopefully approximate the alleged human design. Hastily negotiated truces between bitter rivals. Old grudges had to wait. All rivalries paled in the face of surviving this new threat. The war zone itself seethed with tension. Countless battleships, cruisers, and fighter wings prowled cautiously, their own wars put on hold. They swept every inch of the heavens for the weakest signal of the warship's arrival. Some expected the craft might show up around the biggest fighting hotspots, using their chaos to its advantage. Others said it would hit a less defended sector and sow panic behind the lines. No one truly knew. In sepulchral halls, the old folk reminisced of early reports of humanity's stubborn persistence. Humans had survived awful cosmic contractions, crafting clever strategies from spare parts. This warship had appeared to be the zenith of that creativity. Now that same determination could bulldoze the entire region. The prospect left elder generals shaking their heads, remembering how dismissively they had once viewed Earth's glacial advances. As reports came in of partial sightings, the confusion grew. A couple of outposts logged a single momentary sensor contact that disappeared when they tried to lock on. One swore they saw a large vessel going through thick crossfire. Every fleeting detail only bolstered the consensus. This warship defied normal logic. If it did engage, whole windows could collapse. Panic spread among leaders of the factions. Their forces had bled one another for too long to offer a unified defense easily. Scheduling huge flotillas at a moment's notice demanded a trust they lacked. Skeptics wondered if humankind could be bluffing. But all signs pointed to the warship's threat as real. Within days, the whole region was on the brink of meltdown. Fleets regrouped into formations never seen before. Diplomatic channels that had been quiet or hostile have crackled with frantic pleas for cooperation, but none of which have seen a human statement, prema. Broadcasts did not declare Earth's objectives. Silence stoked fear. Maybe the warship brought an ultimatum, surrender or die. Some also believed humans had entered defense agreements with a mysterious superpower and were preparing to take control of the war zone's resources. Others guessed it was a doomsday mission, a grand finale of force to end all local wars. There was no clarity, and the tension only escalated. And so the galaxy braced. The ravaged war zone, already etched with conflict, now confronted an overshadowing possibility: humanity's unstoppable arrival. If a coalition did not rise to meet it, the whole star-spanning region could come under a new order. But if the warship challenged its lawful freedom of navigation in direct confrontation, it would unleash the most massive alliance of war fleets in generations. Either scenario suggested that the galaxy would never be the same, and every commander wondered the same thing. Could anything stop a human ship of war that had outstripped any prophecy? Within the Titan's hull of flesh and weaponry, a mood of determined gravity filled the air. The mission briefings had been terse. Interfere with a galaxy-wide war, send a message that was impossible to ignore, and make sure humankind's voice was one that could not be lost. For millennia, Earth had stood on the sidelines while distant wars raged between alien powers. Those skirmishes often broke into human territory, taking countless lives. Now, Earth would not sit by quietly. The craft itself was the result of Earth's late effort at cosmic significance. Engineers mixed lessons learned from earlier failures with cutting-edge research. Its propulsion could outrun standard interceptors, and its shield layers adjusted to a variety of weapon frequencies. A made-to-order AI suite balanced targeting solutions so the warship could take on multiple enemies at once. This synergy of hardware and human cunning was Earth's last hope in a universe swirling with older, mightier powers. Rows of advanced munitions waited in secret compartments. Torps meant to move past traditional sensor patterns. Kinetic rods that were, once launched, nearly impossible to intercept. The arsenal promised a brief but fierce advantage. The crew understood they'd be outmatched if the entire war front banded together. Its only hope was overwhelming impact, a shock assault that would make the galaxy's factions think twice before challenging Earth again. The crew didn't just represent advanced technology, they carried the hopes of thousands of Earth colonies desperately seeking stability. Each corridor hummed with quiet resolve. Some had lost relatives to alien attacks. Others had endured humiliating concessions that had been extracted from Earth's nascent interstellar presence. Every personal story added to a shared conviction. This warship's deployment was not a quest for conquest, but a quest to show mankind could not be stomped. No official explanation detailed the craft's precise mission. Maybe it came to mediate the savage war, with unstoppable force to enforce a truce. Or perhaps all the intrusions over the millennia had finally vexed Earth, and the planet delivered an end to all threats by battering the region's major fleets. Tension simmered, for even the crew did not have full disclosure. They just knew once they were in, there was no coming back. Sensors were also showing huge fleets congregating. The players of the combat zone, formerly engaged in individualized conflict, had hit the brakes to address this latest incursion. The crew understood the risk. A miscalculation could result in an unstoppable torrent of combined foes, and it would be unthinkable to look away. All of Earth's resources had been poured into this mission. If we return empty-handed, it would only increase the aggression. As the warship poised to deliver a blow, the bridge came alive with readouts of high-energy beams and clusters of missiles saturating the war zone. The crew analyzed patterns below amid the chaos, looking for an entry point. Individuals on the front lines of the galaxy might overlook a lesser vessel, yet not this one. And when the warship revealed itself, entire fleets would turn to respond. That danger notwithstanding, nerves failed the pilot. Such delay served only to embolden their enemies. One question gnawed at many minds. Could the warship actually subdue an area that was already scarred by war? So many species, so many advanced navies in reality. Even a miracle vessel could potentially be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But it required rock-solid faith in the mission. Earth's High Command thought a brief display of unanswerable power would make up for any numerical disadvantage. If the warship could demonstrate, in one tarnishing, dazzling display, its untouchability, then the galaxy might submit to Earth's desire for respect. Upon confirming final checks of the system, the warship's main battery went online. The pilot maneuvered the craft into an approach vector. The thruster hummed with stifled eagerness. The whole crew prepared for the opening move. There was tension in every breath. Alien sensors would soon have them. Then came the real confrontation. The final hope for Earth flew its course, carrying a vow whispered in silence that no matter how hotly the war zone burnt, humankind would not be slighted again. The alarm howled through the chaotic war zone as the human warship finally revealed itself. Dozens of alien fleets, in engagement arcs circling probably contested worlds, broke off from their fights to bring guns to bear on this latecomer. Into the swarming dark, capital vessels from competing species formed for one mission: eradicate the interloper. Bitter foes for years, war-torn alliances were working together out of desperation. The warship was first challenged by a forward scouting squadron. Their interceptors droned in a threatening formation, issuing warnings in dozens of dialects. The warship gave no reply. Suddenly, it accelerated. The interceptors opened fire with conventional lasers, only for their beams to fizzle against advanced shielding. Before they could get regrouped, the warship's rail cannons flared, launching kinetic slugs that vaporized half the squadron in a matter of seconds. Jordan supplemented those files with waves of distress calls from every faction's comm networks. The threat was real. The largest group of battleships moved in. Plasma salvos swept the void, creating a net of destruction. The warship's pilot performed an elegant evasive maneuver, slipping through a corridor of sparse fire. When it was compelled to block a direct hit, its shield shimmered but held too, evincing a disturbing tenacity. It was a revelation to observers the raw difference in power levels. Alien admirals, reeling from these accomplishments, called for an immediate all-fleet strategy. Warships, having pursued local quarrels, turned to unite and overtook the human craft. Such a large-scale realignment rattled the local lines, but fear trumped caution. If left to run free, entire star systems could go dark under the beam of the warship. The message was unmistakable: either band together to stop the warship or face complete annihilation. As the warship flew deeper, a second wave hit. This time, it was a pincer movement with multiple destroyers. They launched torpedoes carrying subspace warheads that had been specifically designed to defeat standard shields. The warship then sent off a series of intercept drones that intercepted and neutralized the vast majority of the torpedoes while they were still in flight. Some broke through the perimeter, rattling the craft's shield. Quickly, the pilot redirected power to localized defense modules, absorbing the impacts with negligible damage. This exchange concluded quickly, adding to the debris of alien wreckage drifting afloat. Dozens of survivors sent urgent radio calls for reinforcements. The relentless pattern gave everyone pause. The warship appeared to read their moves. Within the craft, advanced AI worked alongside human tacticians, scanning sensor data in real time, setting traps for every flaw. Even about species famed for cunning strategy, their standard maneuvers started unraveling. A few moments later, the warship drove into the center of a massive cluster of fleet. This fleet, arrayed around a vital resource planet, bristled with weapons that would have just a few minutes before turned on each other. Using their fire together, they created a nearly solid wall of plasma beams. On any ordinary day, the dense bombardment would have vaporized the largest dreadnought in moments. But the warship made hairpin turns, threading between the beams with precision. The event was a show-stopping spectacle that left many viewers speechless. At a critical moment, the craft opened up a barrage of high-energy blasts from its forward cannons. Whole frigates melted in the force. The rest dispersed chaotically, their formation cohesion dissipating. A Titanic battleship desperate launched a ram attempt, hoping to crush the warship's hull between her own. The unwieldy piles up sideways, allowing the battleship to crash through a wave of friendly cruisers. The ensuing chain reaction engulfed several vessels in a fiery spiral. Shaken survivors understood the unspeakable. They were overmatched in every dimension: speed, firepower, strategic cunning. Morale plummeted. They looked on as the warship pressed on, irrepressible. There were only temporary delays in resistance. Mind you, this realization hammered Philip of every goddamn species there, from the most proud and warlike of factions to the most sly and stealthy of smugglers. No corner of the conflict's tapestry escaped the overshadowing presence of the unstoppable craft. Through distant star lanes, images in real time of the carnage spread. Viewers understood that the invulnerable battleship had breached a theater of war that few believed any ship could breach. The scarred fleets that had fought endless stalemated battles had been united, ineffectually. Now the inexorable moved forward, leaving destruction behind. Some are betting on a final push at the region's command centers. Others speculated that the warship was after some deeper undisclosed purpose. When the initial engagement concluded, the Invincible disappeared once again from close sensor range, presumably cloaked or jumping a sector. The trembling defenders struggled to reorganize, but their joint trust was incredibly thin. Accusations ricocheted, each side accusing the other of allowing the warship to escape. In the meantime, observers had gleaned a single truth from this gargantuan skirmish. The warship that couldn't be stopped had a talent that exceeded conventional definitions of dangerous. If it decided to hit the war zone's heart, it would be potentially devastating. And by the look of it, that's precisely where it was headed. News of these decisive victories for the warship created near panic among its war zone's major coalitions. When traditional military might had failed, the factions resorted to their most desperate tactics. Ancient superweapons, dusty prototypes, and whispers of forbidden tech all hit the table. No one thought they could duplicate the warship's advanced systems, but perhaps they could create a single strike powerful enough to cripple it. Time was short. In a frantic council, great leaders of warring species gathered in tenuous peace. They combed through every piece of intel collected from the warship's combat logs, rail velocities, shield recharge intervals, potential hull weaknesses. Theories included everything from some kind of extremely localized gravity trap to a giant singularity warhead. Each scheme was risk-laden. If they misfired, entire systems could lie in ruin in an already ravaged war zone. Even so, such apocalyptic peril was nothing compared to the destruction the unbeatable warship could bring. Suzanne, secret channels opened, forging an unprecedented alliance, a last coalition that pooled resources to lay an ambush. They chose a key system where debris which orbited, remnants of hundreds of years of fighting, created a maze. Amidst false signals, they laid specialized mines, loaded with immense yield antimatter charges. At its heart, a rigged device that could bring the entire systems star to its knees if unleashed, a final, monstrous effort to entomb the inevitable in outre cosmic wrath. The plan depended on luring the warship into this deadly trap. Rumors and whispers of betrayal ran rampant, since no faction really trusted another. But all acknowledged the unstoppable overshadowed all that distrust. Crews gathered in silence, refitting ships with sophisticated sensors to hide the star trap's presence. Some sub-factions that followed its progress in the dark engaged in quiet conspiracy to allow the warship to break the net, intending to sabotage the other participants. The whole scheme hinged on a razor edge between deceit and necessity. Meanwhile, the relentless craft continued its relentless advance. As it sped, it cut down smaller ships trying to slow it. Each new confrontation was over in the same manner. Crumpled hulks battered to pieces, mad retreats, wiring it up for a jump through subspace. Observers gathered that the warship adjusted its tactics after each engagement. The crew of allied fleets lost morale. Some fled rather than confront an inevitable doom. But the conspirators pushed ahead with the last gambit, certain it was their only chance. As the Unstoppable neared the marked system, the United Armada lay in wait. The star's rotating debris cloud hid their trap. The warship swept in, surveying what looked to be an underdefended section. Tactical illusions produced phony energy signatures indicating a bunch of poorly guarded convoys, just the kind of lures. The Unstoppable, always watching, stopped to investigate. And just like that, the net tightened. Dozens of heavy cruisers had darted from behind asteroids, spearing the warship's shield with pinpoint beams. Multi-tiered missiles with exotic warheads streaked in from every angle. The thrusters of the Unstoppable blared, but the air was thick with metal fragments. It became more difficult to make evasive maneuvers. Even so, the craft's shield flared brightly, absorbing a volley that would have decimated any lesser vessel. The ambushers fired wave after wave of specialized weapons. The ones built to disrupt shield harmonics, others to scramble sensors. For a moment, it seemed the warship could be pinned. The combined force of so many advanced attacks made its shield flicker. Observers dared to hope. If the runaway lost mobility, the star trap would complete itself, allowing gravitational collapse that no barrier could resist. But in that defining moment, a reversal occurred. A hidden device was activated by the unstoppable that created a localized distortion to knock the mines off course and jamming the meltdown codes for the star trap. Saboteurs inside the coalition had slipped the crew of the unstoppable vital intel, implicating the entire ambush from within. Bombs either misfired or wound up drifting harmlessly. The meltdown never activated. Instead, the ambushers were thrown into a state of confusion as their carefully laid plan fell into disarray. Taking the breach, the Unstoppable smashed the largest cruisers with unmanageable rail salvos. Mushrooming explosions illuminated the debris field, sending fragments of ships spewing. Calls in a panic requested fallback. The star trap's meltdown sequence was frozen up to half-arming, risking random star flares that could damage friend and foe alike. The attackers were thrown into disarray. Others attempted to salvage the plan, but the Unstopper took advantage, smashing critical transmissions. In minutes, the whole final gambit fell apart. Each faction was reeling from betrayal it couldn't have predicted, let alone stopped. The battered but still functional, Unstoppable, emerged from the wreckage swirl, trailing faded shield sparks. Observers understood that the feared star meltdown hadn't happened, and all that destruction potential canceled. The Indomitable had outmaneuvered the galaxy's sharpest schemers in one crafty stroke. Their latest effort to neutralize the warship had gone awry. It then dawned on the Watchers that not one measure, nor deception, nor alliances of convenience had overcome the Unstoppable for more than minutes. Together, the galaxy's power proved inadequate to contain Earth's champion. A heavy despair hung over the zone. The Unstoppable continued to soar, and soar, and soar. But only the final confrontation with the region's largest fleets remained. The fractious coalitions lay in tatters, the gamble of desperation undone. The Untouchable had shown that even a diplomatically engineered star collapse was not a surefire defense against humanity's high tech and low cunning. With the star trap rendered inoperable and the last conspirator unmasked, the Invincible fixated on the war zone's nerve center. At the heart of the region sat a fortress planet surrounded by orbitals that made the seat of power for the many warring factions. Supply and command lines all cycled through there. If that hub collapsed, so would any slim chance of controlling the Unstoppable. Desperately trying to avoid full collapse, the beleaguered fleets regrouped for a final stand. The Unquenchable came into the system, scanning countless orbital stations. Huge fortress platforms bristled with tiers of guns as capital ships formed a protective shell. In normal conditions, a fleet like this could survive forever. But their morale was battered, and their ammunition supplies had depleted after constant combat. The method of the Unstoppable exuded sexiness, an aura of inevitability. But even scanning it filled him with dread. The craft's energy levels remained dangerously high. The defenders released a torrent of missiles, counting on volume to swamp the Unstoppable's interceptors. For a moment, the star-streaked firmament looked like a fireworks show of foam-crested trails. But the point defenses of the Unstoppable glowed, the beams of each intercept shredding lines of warheads. Surviving ordnance struck the craft's shield, flaring it to almost blinding brilliance. But the Unstoppable plowed ahead, as unstoppable as ever. Sensing the impotence of distant bombing, admirals sent heavier capital ships to intercept the craft in straight lines. Titanic beams of mosaicked arrays scanned the path of the Unstoppable. Now the ship, which was forced to make aggressive evasive maneuvers, took a volley of hits to its shields. But observers ventured to think they saw the halting inching. Could brute force eventually break it? But that hope was short-lived as the unbeatable C-01 punched back in mind-boggling fashion. Capital ships strobed, one after another, quaking and disintegrating amid rail slugs with more velocity and kinetic energy than any mass driver 1,000 times its size, perforating plating like parchment. The Infallible advanced, methodically disabling engines and reactors. Orbital fortress rings pounded away, but each volley achieved less than the last. Within hours, entire stretches of the outer defense ring fell. Flames and debris poured across the world's upper atmosphere. Urgent broadcasts told citizens to evacuate if they were able. This was no ordinary battle. It was the final blow. The inevitable next trained itself on the central fortress station, which hovered above the world's largest city. That station was command for local lords who ruled the area's feuding alliances. Now they were cowering, their last lines crumbling. The warship bolted across space in one ungainly lurch, tuning out frantic transmissions that pleaded for negotiation or mercy. The time for talk had passed. An unnatural hush enveloped moments before the unstoppable lit up. The fortress station's hulking shield sputtered as it attempted to deflect high-speed rail shots. But the relentless hammered away, volley after volley, with a barrage that overwhelmed shield generators. The station's hull buckled, whole decks venting atmosphere in spirals. The defenders, too weak to fight off the juggernaut, surrendered in droves or ran for escape pods. Explosions reverberated through the station, ending with a final core rupture that splintered it. Debris fell out of the planet's sky. Above, observers glimpsed a second sun, a flash from a second flaring muscle that signaled the station's death. The unstoppable whipped through the ruins, triumphant. No other defenses emerged to counter it. Galactic transmissions painted an identical picture. Unstoppable desolation over the entire. Fleet after fleet had been laid to waste. Centuries of conflict hardened to molten slag. Released from any effective opposition, the steady loomed menacingly over the star lanes. Silvery silence blanketed every species in attendance. Once an endless battleground of rival powers, the region had been remade under the unstoppable coming of Earth. In that climactic wake, even the most obstinate diehards understood the battle was lost. They indicated unconditional ceasefires, undoing whatever was left of their blockade. The warship's final, irreversible blow had destroyed the war zone's fragile equilibrium, birthing one hard verity. No force the fractious factions could muster could stand against humankind's implacable technology and indefatigable spirit. Appeared to lose sound like the alarms throughout all starbases going dead. The mission of the never stopped, whatever haunting ends had guided it, was a resounding triumph that had thrown the galaxy's best and bloodiest war into entropy. Onlookers wondered whether the warship might just now cross over, forcing Earth's hand in other domains. The powers of the region, drained, could only sit by and hope they were witnessing the arrival of a new cosmic age. Earth's champion had been proven utterly unstoppable, shattering whole fleets in its wake. A silence fell over the war-torn area. The invincible had struck its final blow, bowing to both the titanic fleets that had once brought ruin to stars by the million. Debris obliquely orbited charred worlds, proof of a war fought until a lone human warship obliterated all illusory parity. The survivors of each faction tended to wounds and grief, confronting the unwelcome fact that the arrival of humankind had irreversibly changed their universe. On crumbling worlds, citizens emerged from bunkers. They looked up at a new horizon. Gone were the streaks of crossfire across the firmament. Most had prayed for relief from endless conflict, and yet inescapable salvation came without warning. Some celebrated humanity as liberators, thanking an unstoppable presence for bringing the war to an end. Others bore resentment, viewing only the destruction inflicted by unpreventable weapons. The region was untroubled by fractious wars, yet beset by the irresistible power that dwarfed them all. As battered fleets limped home to base, another question came up. What was Earth's plan for the conquered war zone? Does the unassailable plot to take these star systems, or would it just disperse, only for the local powers to rebuild? Rumors abounded. Some thought Earth had meant to form alliances, bringing together old grudges with a will that could not be interrupted. Others wondered whether the indomitable warship might return home, having made a cosmic statement about Earth's undefeated power. Diplomatic back channels crackled with urgent requests. Factions that were long at war with one another wanted to negotiate a stable order, even if just to stave off another unstoppable incursion. But no official emissary from Earth ever came. The indomitable warship gave no high statement. Instead, it remained in occasional sightings, surveying jump points or idling in major trade lanes. Each peak was laced with nervous speculation. Beneath the ship's sardonic quiet, Earth's strategic goals appeared to be understood only by its crew. In shattered starports, makeshift monuments paid tribute to the dead from every species. Several vessels were unsalvageable. A tide of refugees sought safe haven. Old boundaries lost meaning. The inevitable triumph required a new strategy for interstellar diplomacy. Some smaller species took the opportunity to start fresh without large militaries hanging over them. Others feared humanity might double down on control, bringing their unstoppable flavor of order. Across the galaxy, leadership councils were in debate to decide how to respond. Were they to constitute a grand alliance to contain Earth before it spread its influence further and became irresistible? Or was that in vain, considering the unstoppable warship's performance? Knowing that hostility would lead to complete annihilation, many chose cautious cooperation. They reached out toward Earth, hoping to establish common ground or at least avoid conflict. Back on Earth, jumbled transmissions showed a flurry of information spreading about the uncontainable success. People rejoiced that their champion had survived. Released from resource-draining local skirmishes, the colonies of Earth might finally thrive. But quiet voices feared that apparently unstoppable power was, in fact, an unstoppable ambition. If the warship's presence was fear for the galaxy, how long until other powers banded together out of despair, creating a new threat? The unstoppable may stand alone in a galaxy united by dread. In the rubble of the war zone, self-appointed administrators scrambled to re-establish basic services. Star lanes reopened to commerce. Smugglers took advantage of lapses in enforcement, and peacekeepers of various species attempted to fill voids. The memory of the unstoppable ship overshadowed all that, a deterrent by its existence alone that prevented renewed conflict. For now, quiet reconstruction trumped renewed aggression. Over time, legends sprang up about the invincible warship. They spoke of its unstoppable railguns, its unstoppable shield, and the unstoppable courage that guided it. The story became a hinge in the history of the region, a moment when the gruesome cycle of war suddenly stopped. Children on far-off worlds learned to think of humanity as unstoppable strength, a title that inspired equals parts awe and fear. But the last question was left poised. How would the unstoppable change the nature of future wars? Would Earth intervene as a stabilizing force, or would it withdraw, allowing the war zone to chart its own course? The battered factions could only speculate. Some predicted that once humanity proved unstoppable, it would stay indifferent until the next crisis endangered Earth's interests. Or perhaps the indomitable warship had devised an even bolder mission, ushering in a new age of human-led governance. In the somber aftermath, few could say for certain, but everyone acknowledged that indomitable incursion into the war zone represented a before and after moment for galactic affairs. Peace, however tenuous, reigned at least for now. Yet one line resonated across innumerable transmissions. If the unstoppable comes back, will we survive next time? And with that disquieting ironic perspective, the region would step forth on its uncertain morrow, necessarily forevermore redacted by the ineluctable presence of man.